Pythagoras, son of Mnesarchus, pursued inquiry further than all other men, and choosing what he liked from these compositions, claimed for himself a wisdom of his own, much learning, and imposture. Heraclitus Fragment DK B129. Good evening, everybody. This should be a fun one. Now, this one you're really not going to see any videos on. Maybe just a snippet, but this is going to be just me talking, unfortunately. Sorry. Okay, so we'll start it off with our usual. If you wish to donate, it's been over 16 months. $0 via Bitcoin versus Vertcoin. However, there have been generous people who have donated via Google Super Chats, but they take a big chunk out of it. And there has been one person who's donated via PayPal.me, which I have up in the first video of the month, which was yesterday. I made 2 videos. The first video, I went ahead and disclosed it and said thank yous, and it's kind of people that really support me. It's really the reason why I keep going, and not only that, it's the only way I can keep going sometimes, right? All right, so enough of that. First thing, so what's interesting is when you let's start off with the globe, right? The globe Earth. And if you look up, who figured out the Earth is round? That's going to always lead to Pythagoras. In starchild.gsfc.nasa.gov, they say, that Pythagoras reasoned. So they go, whoever is answering it, I really don't know who's answering here, but it has actually been known that the Earth was round since the time of the ancient Greeks. I believe that was Pythagoras who first proposed that the Earth was round sometime around 500 BC. As I recall, his idea on the fact that he showed the moon must be round by observing the shape of the terminator, the line between the part of the moon in light and part of the moon in the dark as it moved through its orbital cycle. Pythagoras reasoned that the moon was round and the Earth must be round as well. After that, you get a bunch of others. And you're going to hear Carl Sagan say it in his Cosmos episode, and you can watch it here.
Pythagoras seems to have been the first person in the history of the world to decide that the Earth was a sphere. Perhaps he argued by analogy with the moon or the sun. Maybe he noticed the curved shadow of the Earth on the moon during a lunar eclipse. Or maybe he recognized that when ships leave Samos, their masts disappear last.
Now, the interesting thing about Pythagoras, there's 2 interesting things about Pythagoras. I mean, there's many. We can look up. There's like 10 strange facts about Pythagoras. Mathematician and cult leader by list verse of Mark Oliver, updated February 7, 2019. But whatever you do, here's what I think is the biggest thing. One, there's no works left over from Pythagoras. Pythagoras never wrote anything down to pass down to anyone else. So how does everyone know? Or I mean, either the government, Carl Sagan, a lot of people, how do they know that Pythagoras was the one who figured out all these things? Well, you're going to have to look at them in some works by others, right? Okay, other people who wrote about him, just kind of like how Plato wrote about Socrates. And again, a lot of people back then thought of him as a god, or maybe what you might consider a daemon, which is different than a demon. A daemon is not a demon in the sense of what a demon is. A daemon is more something that's higher than a man but lower than a god, the highest god type of thing. Second, a lot of pretty much everybody, everyone who wrote about Pythagoras that listened to him, whatever it was, a student of his, etc., defended Pythagoras. They're just in high esteem of Pythagoras, except there's always just that one guy. Who's that one guy that just didn't like Pythagoras? Just kind of saw through Pythagoras for what he was. I mean, everyone liked him, but there's one person that didn't. Who was this one person? Well, here's Heraclitus. And you can't get rid of Heraclitus without knowing who he criticized, because in his fragments, and you can look up all the fragments here, but in his fragments, he has a lot of things he mentions, and I think the things he mentions are great because it's something constant, and what that constant is ever changing. It's always changing. Therefore, it's constant. You know, you can be stationary and constant. You can always be moving and constant. How can you be those two things but still be constant? Well, we could talk about that, and we will talk about that later. Because it's just fun stuff, philosophy, ain't it? Okay. And again, hey, if you want to come on in here, the Zoom meeting link is always there, so you can go ahead and do that. Or some things I do like to present. So if you do come in, I may let you in, but I may not converse with you until just kind of after I want to showcase, or maybe I'll just if you want to wait, I'll just go ahead and say a couple of things and I'll go, so what do you think, type of thing. All right. So let's read a little bit about Pythagoras, and then we'll read a little bit about Heraclitus. So here I'm going to start with that list first, and again, all of these links that I'm reading out is going to be provided to you in the YouTube description box and or vim.tv via Steemit. Okay, so here we go. Pythagoras, the man behind the Pythagorean theorem, was more than just a mathematician. He was a spiritual leader with followers who thought he'd been sent from heaven. For the Pythagoreans, math was a religious experience, and some equations were divine secrets unfit for public eyes. When your middle school teacher showed you how to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle, you probably didn't get down on your knees and start worshiping him as a god. But when it first happened in ancient Greece, that was pretty much how people reacted. There was a whole cult behind the man who figured out how to measure the side of a triangle. And as you might imagine, they had some pretty strange beliefs. So number 10 was Pythagoras led a cult that worshipped numbers. Pythagoras had followers, a whole group of mathematicians signed up to be his pupils, to learn everything he knew and to help him solve the great riddles of the universe. But this was more than just a group of people who liked math. It was a full-blown religion. Numbers, Pythagoras believed, were the elements behind the entire universe. He taught his followers that the world was controlled by mathematical harmonies that made up every part of reality. More than that, though, these numbers were sacred, almost like gods. The Pythagoreans had sacred numbers. 7 was the number of wisdom, 8 was the number of justice, and 10 was the most sacred number of all. Every part of math was holy. When they solved a new mathematical theorem, they would give thanks to the gods by sacrificing an ox. The Greeks thought it was a little freaky. They didn't just call it a philosophy or a religion. They saw it as a cult, and a dangerous one at that. Pythagoras scared people. They even burned down his house and chased him out of town, fearing his mystic command over the sacredness of numbers. 9. They prayed to the number 10, which is interesting. Why didn't he put that as number 10? I guess that's just me. All right. The Pythagoreans had a sacred symbol called the tetractys. It was a triangle with 10 points across 4 rows, meant to symbolize the organization of space in the universe. 10, they believed, was the number of the highest order, which contained the course of all mortal things, and they literally worshipped it. Pythagoras' followers had a set prayer they used to worship the number 10. Bless this divine number, thou who generated gods and men, they would say, for the divine number begins with the profound, pure unity until it comes to the holy 4. Then it begets the mother of all, the all-comprising, all-bounding, the firstborn, the never-swerving, the never-tiring holy 10, the keyholder of all. Everyone had to do it. If you wanted to join the Pythagoreans, you had to swear an oath to the holy triangle. Does that ring a bell? The Holy Trinity? The triangle? Providence? Pyramids? All this stuff? They would swear their loyalty by that pure, holy, four-letter name on high, meaning the Tetractys. Then they would have to swear by Pythagoras himself, who, like a mathematical Prometheus, to our mortal race did bring the Tetractys. 8. Pythagoras was treated like a god. Pythagoras' followers believed that he was a demigod. They called him the divine Pythagoras and told people that he was the son of a god, usually either Hermes or Apollo, depending on whom you asked. They even had hymns to Pythagoras' divinity. Pythaeus, first of the Simon tribe, one song went, bore from the embraces of the god of day, renowned Pythagoras, the friend of Jove. They even thought that Pythagoras had superpowers. His followers said that he could tame eagles and bears by stroking them. He could control any animal for that matter with the sheer powers of his voice, and he had the power to write words on the face of the moon. One of the biggest legends about him was that he had a golden thigh. When someone doubted his divinity, it was said that Pythagoras would show them his simmering thigh and win a new convert. In one story, he showed a priest his thigh, and as a reward was given a magical golden dart that let him fly over mountains, expel diseases, and calm storms. 7. He told people he would be reborn after death. The reborn motif and son of God motif and all this other stuff that seems to be prevalent along with the Hebrews that came after the Greeks. They borrowed so much stuff from the Greeks. Heck, they even borrowed from Heraclitus, and they borrowed from the Egyptians. And a lot of this stuff, Pythagoras himself borrowed from the Hindus, and and again, the Egyptians, and everything's a mess, folks. That's why we're exploring the further and further we go along this history that's been set before us. So it wasn't that people just got so swept up in the hypotenuse finding craze that they started making up stories about Pythagoras. He encouraged them. Pythagoras directly told people that he was the son of God and that he had repeatedly reincarnated until he reached his current form. In his past life, Pythagoras claimed he was the son of Hermes, who had offered Pythagoras any gift he wanted except for immortality. Pythagoras asked to retain his memories through each life and now could remember every person he had ever been. So reincarnation, folks. He had fought with Achilles in the Trojan War. He had worked as a humble fisherman. He had even been a beautiful courtesan who slept with powerful men. More than that, though, Pythagoras claimed that he could sense old souls in new bodies. Legend has it that he once saw a dog getting beaten on the streets and ran in the way to stop the blows. "Stop, don't beat it," Pythagoras yelled. "It is the soul of a friend." He had recognized its voice in the dog's barking. 6. He was one of the earliest and laziest vegetarians. Pythagoras was one of the first people in Western history to abstain from eating meat for moral reasons. Eating the dead, he taught his followers, polluted the body, and so then they must never kill a living thing. His rules were a bit weird, though. You might remember that we mentioned earlier his sacrifice of oxen, and yes, he did both. Like a vegan who eats fish and chicken, Pythagorean vegetarianism had some weird loopholes. The offerings he made were always inanimate. The Greek writer Diogenes wrote in a biography of Pythagoras. Then Diogenes clarified, though some say that he would offer cocks, sucking goats, and porkers, still Pythagoras drew the line somewhere, but lambs, Diogenes explained, never. Pythagoras' rules seemed every bit as weird to the Greeks as they do to us. And look, we had some of that weird foodstuffs written into the Old Testament. Maybe even the New Testament. I can't remember. Right? Weird. Okay. Pythagoras' rules seem every bit as weird to the Greeks as they do to us. During his time, the Greeks spread a joke about a Pythagorean who insisted that he never ate any living thing. After getting caught eating dog meat, the Pythagorean said, "Yes, but I killed them first, so they are still not alive." Talk about hypocrites, huh? 5. He had rules for everything. The Pythagoreans might have had loopholes for meat, but that didn't mean they could do whatever they wanted. Pythagoras had some incredibly strict and specific rules for just about everything, including which shoe to put on first. One must put the right shoe on first, Pythagoras told his followers, and once your shoes were on, he said, one must not travel on public roads. He didn't stop at footwear, though. Pythagoras weighed in on the 5-second rule for food that falls on the floor, telling his followers never to taste ye of what falls beneath the board. So that's where we got it from. He was exceptionally strict about sex. Bodily fluids, Pythagoras seemed to have believed, were part of a man's soul. When a man expelled them, he gave us some of his strength. Pythagoras' followers were taught to abstain from sex whenever possible. But if they couldn't help themselves, he told them, keep to the winter for sexual pleasures. In summer, abstain. 4. New initiates had to spend 5 years in silence. Silence, Pythagoras believed, was very important. Staying quiet was a way to learn self-control, and so he made sure that anyone who wanted to join his cult could do it. Anyone who signed up had to close his mouth and keep it shut for 5 years straight. In part, this was to help people stay pure, but there's a lot of reasons to believe they had more to do with making sure they could keep secrets. Even in ancient Greece, calling yourself the son of God and getting people to worship numbers wasn't exactly considered being a model citizen. The Pythagoreans tried to keep that part of their lives quiet. As a result, they wouldn't let anyone into the fold unless the person proved that he could keep his mouth shut. Most of the Greeks, though, didn't understand the dark implications of these silent acolytes. The Greeks were just happy that a Pythagorean wasn't going on about numbers for a change. Generally, people were more impressed by the quiet ones than the people who were allowed to talk. 3. He may have drowned a man for discovering irrational numbers. Killing people because they're exposing your stuff, I guess. Sounds familiar too, huh? All right. One of Pythagoras' most famous followers was Hippasus. Legend has it that he was the first person to prove the existence of an irrational number, and he may have died for it. Hippasus developed a proof that showed that the square root of 2 was just an irrational, never-ending number. This was more than just a major discovery, it was open rebellion. Pythagoras had taught that all numbers could be expressed as ratios of integers, and Hippasus had proven his divine teacher wrong. According to legend, Hippasus showed his proof to Pythagoras while they were on a boat. In response, Pythagoras grabbed Hippasus, wrestled him to the side of the boat, and held his head underwater until he stopped moving. And Pythagoras threw the lifeless body overboard, turned to the others aboard, and warned them to never tell a soul about what happened. That story is probably not true. It seemed to be a twisted version of a Pythagorean fable that said Hippasus was drowned by the gods as punishment for disclosing the secret of irrational numbers to the world. But that story still reveals something creepy about the Pythagorean cult. They spread the story, it's believed, as a parable, a warning telling their followers that they shared the cult's secrets with the world, they could expect a watery grave. Mystery schools all over again. He gave speeches behind a curtain. The man behind the curtain. Wizard of Oz, folks. There were 2 types of Pythagoreans. The Acousmatikoi and the Mathematikoi. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. The Mathematikoi were Pythagoras' closest and most trusted followers. He would meet with them in person and explain his theorems to them in detail. They were allowed to know the secrets of advanced math that they were kept hidden from the rest of the world. They had to pay a heavy price for their privilege. To become a Mathematikoi, a person had to give up meat, women, and all private possessions. From then on, their only loyalty was to Pythagoras. The rest were allowed to be Acousmatikoi, followers who were never allowed to see Pythagoras' face. When he spoke to them, Pythagoras would be hidden behind a veil like the Wizard of Oz. Nothing was explained to the Acousmatikoi in any detail. They were merely expected to follow his rituals. They could not be trusted with the dangerous secrets of higher mathematics. Oh, yeah, you can't advance in a higher part of the mystery school. You'll just be our servants. All right, slaves, whatever. All right. 1. He gave up his life to protect fava beans. One of Pythagoras' strangest rules was that his followers were never to touch fava beans. Beans, he taught, took away a piece of the soul. They are flatulent, he explained. When that gas came out, it would partake most of the breath of life. There may have been more to it than just that. It's claimed that he believed beans contained the souls of the dead, and his followers eating fava beans and gnawing on the heads of one's parents are one and the same. Beans were so sacred to the Pythagoreans that in the end, Pythagoras gave his own life to protect them. According to one story, Pythagoras met his end when a man, furious that he couldn't see Pythagoras' face, burned Pythagoras' house to ground. Pythagoras had to run for his life, but stopped before a field of beans. He would rather die, he declared, than step on a single bean. He let the man cut his throat so that the beans could live. But that doesn't make sense. I mean, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense, but, I mean, That's a fire running through a field of beans. Wouldn't the field burn in fire? I mean, interesting, though. All right, of course, that's just one of many stories about his death, but almost all of them end with Pythagoras giving his life for a bean field. In some stories, he gets attacked for trying to overthrow the government. In others, he gets burned at a stake. But in nearly every one, Pythagoras meets his end by choosing to give up his own life so that he doesn't have to trample on beans. Now, that's one I've never heard. Now, hopefully that's something you never heard, but you know, it's always good to look at a couple more things. And again, just Google it or just go on, just go wherever you can, learn about Pythagoras. As much as you can about Pythagoras, because everybody seems to tell you Pythagoras, 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 globe earth, Pythagoras, numerology, Pythagoras, divine nature, Pythagoras, numbers, Pythagoras. He is probably... oh, goodness. That covers to make sure that the flies don't get in my drink. Okay, and this is by ourwaysthehighway.wordpress.com. I really don't know what this was just one of the results. Noel J. Hadley, November 15, 2017. Flat Earth, the Mystery Religion. Interesting. Maybe he's proposing that the... We'll see. We'll see after we read it. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, Pythagoras, and the mathematical origins of globe Earth. I wonder if this person is a flat earther. We'll see. Why must Christians with advanced degrees persist in dangling Pythagoras as proof of the world's spherical shape whenever the subject of flat earth in the Bible comes up? It's as if I should feel obliged to maneuver my faith in the created order around a pagan occultist rather than God's own account of things. But that's how these conversations often go. Our modern day pastors and theologians have handed over a spiritual authority to men of another cloth, perhaps because it's dangerous to be right when the establishment is wrong. Inevitably, as these discussions often go, I am reminded that all great scholars... shoot. That won't work. Here we go. Yep. Sorry. I'm reminded that all great scholars who found favor with the establishment agenda throughout civilized history from Pythagoras onward hold a globular belief over a biblical one. Never mind 3 millennia of simple folk, pew boys, godly men, and women who place their full-fledgling faith in Scripture alone. In many ways, Flat Earth is the untold story, a multitude of raised hands among uncounted, or squeaky wheels get the grease, as they say. These modern-day Christian conversationalists are prepared to fall back upon the position, but doesn't God's revelation come to us not only by His Word alone, but also through the halls of science? So we return to the subject of Pythagoras again. Flat Earth has come into discussion as some of spherical Earth's first promoter naturally. Pythagoras, 570 to 495 BC, pagan prophet and priest, or as many of our great globe-trotting scholars would have it, facilitator of God's extra-biblical scientific enlightenment. It is said among the ancients that Pythagoras was born of a virgin followed by Apollo. According to some accounts, Apollo appeared to his earthly father with a familiar message. He must not know Pythagoras' mother, whom he was betrothed to, until after she gave birth to the child. Other sources claim the babe gleamed with a supernatural brightness. Even the Oracle of Delphi had a part in the narrative. She prophesied of his great works and wonders which would benefit all of mankind. This much seems true, and while the globular Christians, sponsored by two millennia of academic backing, will likely discover a sudden flurry of discernment among the bulk of these accounts. Enough to wave such nonsense off as another fanciful fabrication by pagan dreamers and wistful thinkers will suppose his rightness to a degree. There is fact and there is a mythology. Still, such textbook folklore might as well be true, should he understand, the true identity behind the mystery's fingerprints, and quite similarly, what their celebrated, albeit mythological stage productions are truly pointing to. Satan is the father of lies. He also casts seeds and plants them. He will have his children, whether they are the children of Cain or of another voluntary nature. What we can say with a degree of self-assurance is the man who would reveal the once hid long and maintain the mystery of globe earth was personally discipled by Zarathustra, known as Zoroaster among the Greeks. Zarathustra also revealed a thing or two regarding the hidden mysteries in his lifetime, namely, all mythologies pointed to one monotheistic belief system. That would be the sun, Sol Invictus, Mithras. It's all the same God really, and relates right back to Pythagoras' father Apollo. Satan goes by many names, and will gladly be worshipped by any one of them. Greece's first great philosopher also received a rather interesting worldly education. He was schooled among the Orphic and Chaldean mysteries, and was even initiated into the Egyptian mysteries of Isis. Not to be overlooked, however, was his education from the Jews. No, not the Torah, mind you. Pythagoras doesn't come across as much of a Sabbath churchgoer. He became rather well acquainted with the secret oral traditions of Moses, or the Jewish mysteries. For the record, I am of the firm belief in the biblical narrative that Moses, who was certainly well educated within the Egyptian mysteries, left all that behind him just when he encountered the true God of creation in the burning bush. Jesus later condemned such perverse traditions, Mark 7:13, which wouldn't be inscribed into the Babylonian Talmud and Kabbalah texts, and some several hundred years later, in Numbers, their occult power and mystic virtues. William Wynne Westcott devoted much of his book to Pythagoras. Writes, ancient records show that Jewish rabbis added to their practical values special peculiar purposes and looked to them to furnish deeper views of nature, existence, and doctrine. The Jewish rabbis discovered so much of interest and importance behind the merely superficial value of numbers and of words as their representatives that they gradually developed a complete science of numerical conceptions apart from mathematics. This took the name of the Kabbalah. Every high school student having taken a semester in geometry has heard of the Pythagorean theorem, almost known as the 47th problem of Euclid. It likely hasn't occurred to him that Pythagorean's theorem has long been an occultist symbol and a highly meaningful among Freemasonry. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, is a question which will certainly be proposed by the man who demands Pythagorean is proof of the globe. There is no avoiding his blending of magic with numbers, and yet avoiding globe proponents do. The Christian theologian Dr. R.C. Sproul, who has openly advocated redefining scripture in light of the Copernican revolution, writes he had a spiritual and religious interest in mathematics, by which mystical significance was assigned to numbers. He considered the number 10 to be the perfect number in the study of math. The formal, pertaining to form or essence, becomes more important than the material, the intellectual or spiritual more important than the physical. For Pythagoras and his followers, mathematics is a matter of soul. Roman philosopher Porphyry wrote of him, and again, Pythagoras never wrote anything himself, at least as anyone knows about. So a lot of this has to come from other philosophers, Greek or Roman, etc. The numerals of Pythagoras were hieroglyphic symbols by means whereof he explained all ideas concerning the nature of things. And there's author William Wynne Westcott again. The principles governing numbers were supposed to be the principles of all real existences, and as numbers are the primary constituents of mathematical quantities and at the same time present many analogies to various realities, it was further inferred that the elements of numbers were the elements of realities. We're going to speed ahead real quick. Oh, okay. How about that? Pythagoras would give lectures while standing behind a curtain, thereby denying all access from his students unless they should achieve the higher learning in their studies. The philosophical school of Pythagoras was, in a measure, also a series of initiations where he caused his pupils to pass through a series of degrees and never permitted them personal contact with himself until they had reached the higher grades. Just as it is with the Freemasons today, his degrees were 3 in number. In Pythagoras' defense, Dr. R.C. Sproul is quick to add that math has served a crucial handmaiden in advances in natural sciences documented by history. Advances in mathematical theory have ushered in several revolutions, such as the Copernican revolution, the revolution initiated by Isaac Newton with his physics, and the revolution in our day of nuclear science. And yet his teachings, which derived from the mysteries, inspired minds well beyond mathematics. The Gnostics owe much to him. In the secret teachings of all ages, Manly P. Hall writes, the God of Pythagoras was the monad, or the one that is everything. He described God as the supreme mind distributed through all parts of the universe, the cause of all things, the intelligence of all things, and power within all things. He further declared the motion of God to be circular, the body of God to be composed of the substance of light, and the nature of God to be composed of the substance of truth. According to the Christian theologian Hippolytus of Rome, Pythagoras then declared the originating principle of the universe to be the unbegotten monad and the generated duad and the rest of the numbers. And he says that the monad is the father of the duad, and the duad is the mother of all things that are being begotten. The begotten one being mother, other things that are begotten. In some versions of Christian Gnosticism, especially those deriving from Valentinus, the demiurge had a role in the creation of the material world separate from his greater contemporary, the monad. It is important to note that God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, is often interpreted as the Gnostic demiurge, not the monad. Correct. There's an administrator. Interesting. I'll admit administrator. How you doing, administrator? Oh, hey. How's it going? Can you want to say something? Test out your mic.
Old Testament Yahweh is often
can you mute your YouTube?
Monad. Yep. Done.
Antarctic Expedition, aka I can't forget.
That's it. My name's Brian. Brian.
All right, sorry, Brian. Yeah.
Nice to see you, man. Just thought I'd pop in. I saw your channel going. Thought I'd say hello.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
My friend Ashley here, just hanging out.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just going through it.
What's up, man?
So before I go on, have you how much do you know about ancient Greek philosophers and mythology?
Not much, really.
Okay.
Honestly, I just kind of popped in. Thought I'd say hello. If you want to talk about it, I'm interested though. I'm just kind of here to hang out. Just want to say hi.
So a couple of days ago, I found about Heraclitus. So Heraclitus was an ancient Greek philosopher. He's one of the pre-Socratics, but he was different in many ways because he was more the initiator of the metaphysical world. At least he would philosophize about it, but a lot of his stuff was pretty obscure, vague, and he stated that only people who figured things out would understand what he's saying in his fragments and things like that. And then so a lot of his stuff influenced Stoics, and a couple of popular Stoics is like Epictetus, who was a slave, and Marcus Aurelius, who was an emperor, and he was probably the best emperor of all. That many would say he tried to do good. He was called the philosopher king. And then
it's the guy in the movie. Come on, I'm an idiot.
Gladiator.
Right now. Yeah, Gladiator. Yeah.
And he influenced, and of course Marcus Aurelius in turn influenced a lot of people like George Washington, and as far as like the history goes. And then you get a couple other philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, that's influenced by Heraclitus. And then you've got Socrates and Plato, that kind of, they have their own thing, but it's also good. Socrates, just like Pythagoras, never wrote anything down. Plato was a good writer, but a lot of his stuff was just the dialogues, representation of just a lot of what, the conversations of what Socrates had. And then Aristotle went a whole different way. After basically it was always a battle during Socrates' time against him and the Sophists. And the Sophists I kind of went over yesterday. And, you could kind of know them by the 3 R's, by their rhetoric, their recompense, and their relativism. And a lot of their stuff is about persuasion rather than convincing. Anyways, that's something you could watch over. So now I'm harping it back kind of towards Pythagoras in some ways, because Pythagoras doesn't have anything written yet. How does the U.S. government or NASA and Carl Sagan, scientists, know so much about Pythagoras when Pythagoras never wrote anything? And so all we know are what people wrote of Pythagoras, and Pythagoras has a lot of weird things, of course. So and with Pythagoras stemmed the mystery schools. And within the Sophists stemmed basically a whole bunch of how things are now with media and alt media, cult of personalities and what have you. And even academia in some sense stems a lot from sophistry. And then you've got finally something that's been hidden and obscure for such a long time. Heraclitus, the Stoics, kind of Socrates in some way with Platoism, and but it's just trying to find the meaning of the truth that's almost it's constant and ever changing. It's very similar to the Tao in many ways, as opposed to like Pythagoras and his metaphysical interpretation, which he charged, had people come in, had to keep it a secret. There's only some people that are worthy of learning and others aren't. Same thing we see in the mystery schools of today. And when you look into like Freemasonry, Illuminati, or all those mystery schools that are kind of involved. And so we're here today, and it's all been very similar to where it originated in ancient Greece. And I think it's very interesting. I don't know if other people think it's very interesting. So that's where it's at.
It sounds interesting to me. I've enjoyed it.
So tomorrow, hopefully, I've got enough pieced together so I could showcase basically here's Pythagoras and the mystery schools, and here are the sophists, and all of this spurred, and all that support was on the globe Earth, the spherical Earth. And then everyone before that, everyone that was within the like the ideals of Stoicism and learning about the truth, learning about the truth, discovering it, and not really caring about rhetoric and persuading people. They just want to find the underlying truth of what things are, just kind of like how we want to know what the truth is, right?
Right, yeah.
And so, and a lot of those never postulated that the Earth was a sphere. They had their own interpretations, whether it was flat or not. They just didn't have it that it was going to be a sphere. And so it's funny how when you get the liars, the hypocrites, the people who are just wanting money out of it, or basing up of fame and just having the most amount of people who believe in you rather than actually being understanding and searching for the truth, but saying, hey, I know the truth, come here, listen to me. And then more people are going to him, hey, look, that guy has 200,000 followers, so obviously he knows something, rather than going out there and saying, or actually even engaging in other people. Like, no one probably wanted to engage in Socrates. It's like, oh man, Socrates might make us look bad because he's just gonna expose us, type of thing. So same thing, you don't see the elites talking with people like you, me, and whatever, because we're gonna ask these questions which they're not gonna really have an answer to, and we may even find a way to just find the hypocritical answer that they're gonna give and say, hey, look, this guy contradicted himself. So how can you trust them? So let's find the truth. But they're never going to allow that, and they never have. And so basically, I'm lumping it.
A lot more information's coming out though these days. There's a lot more information coming out there. A lot of people are like, it does seem like a lot of people are waking up to the spiritual side of what's really going on, which is more like towards the truth. If you find the truth and you're more in touch with what's around you, and like you kind of have a grasp on everything, then you start being like, okay, if I'm trying to get a grasp on this and everything they're telling me is wrong, then what am I trying to get a grasp on here? Where's the truth out here? Then you have to really kind of get your arms around it.
Yeah. So basically, all I'm trying to do in tomorrow's, hopefully it's tomorrow, which will interestingly be my birthday.
Hey, happy birthday!
It's not my birthday. Oh, it is.
Well, happy almost fucking birthday.
It is my birthday. Thanks.
Oh, hey, really? Hey, happy birthday!
So the idea is, all right, so we've got these ancient Greek philosophers, and we know a little bit about them and kind of what they're up to. You got one side who's really looking for the truth and really discerning, and you've got another group who's just leading these mystery schools where it's, you have to be in the club, and if you ain't in it, well, too bad. And you got the others where they don't really care about the mystery schools. They want to form their own, and they don't really care about looking for the truth. They just say, hey, I've got the truth. Of course, if nobody knows what the truth is, You're gonna look for someone who says that they have it, and you're gonna be like, okay, here's money. Show me the truth. So, fast forward to today, and we're in the same boat. We got the mystery schools. We got the people who, all the conspiracy theories about who's really leading the world, and you got all these people who are just propped up and use rhetoric a lot, which is, of course, lawyers, politicians, and same
just
shit,
actors,
right?
A bunch of actors, just actors and storylines.
And in common theme with these is the globe. The Earth is a globe. And then you've got the ones who are looking for the truth. They don't state that Earth is a globe. Most likely, they have their own things, whether it's flat, whether it's a square, but they don't say it's.
A lot of people are like, a lot of the people who aren't like flat, because it takes. I feel like there's like globe people, and then there's a lot of people that aren't being overlooked. There are people who are like, I don't really know, like, how am I supposed to really know? And they're open minded to it. They're like, whatever, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Who fucking cares? Like, it may not be like anything's possible. And there's a lot of people like that. That's what ends up bridging you over to the flat Earth zone. It's like you start looking at the truth shit with that open mind.
And the thing is, the way to find out the truth is to keep looking for it. Like you're saying, let's go to the Antarctic. I'm here. You're saying, let's go to the actual magnetic North Pole. Like,
go check it out.
We won't know until we actually go looking for it. But then again, we're against these people who say, hey, look, we've already shown you the Earth. We've already shown you Antarctica. We've already shown you the North Pole. We've shown you.
It's already proved. It's already proven. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's like you don't need to go searching. I already have the answer, and you pay me for the answer. That's why we pay NASA and all this other stuff.
They can the scientists, so they can tell you the answers to the universe, which are known, of course.
Yeah. So I think it's just funny how we can look into it, and then if we look into just all the stuff that was just within the Greeks' time, which they borrowed a lot from the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and we got even the Old Testament, which is borrowed a lot from the Greeks and the Egyptians, and again Babylonians, but it's very, very heavily relied upon by the Greeks.
They overlap a lot, right? Don't the story? A lot of the stories are all kind of, they sort of overlap in a lot of their stuff. Yeah.
And then New Testament is the same way, and it's funny how people will just believe in the literal Jesus Christ, which is a Jew, which, I mean, a lot of these Christians are like, oh, those Jews, liars and whatnot. And then they're like, oh, by the way, Jesus is a Jew, so, we can't say too much stuff about him.
Yeah, so I take it a little easy.
And then you talk to the Jews and they go, oh, Jesus Christ, I don't like that guy. It's like, hey, he's a Jew. He's the son of God. Why would you not like him? Oh, they'll tell you, it's like, it doesn't make sense unless one, probably Jesus Christ wasn't a Jew if there was a literal Jesus Christ, right? And then if there's similarity stories of Jesus Christ, of a Christ figure, which is a savior or anointed one, someone like Jesus was just like many of the others who's just always risen and was sacrificed, and who keeps killing off our Christs.
Right.
So, I mean, we never know. I mean, there could be interpretation. Like a lot of people interpret, there was never a Jesus Christ. There never was. It was just some other older story. Okay, so if it's not literal, then it's like figurative. It's like, all right, so let's keep going further and further back. What's the common theme? What's the point of these sons of God's always appearing and then die, like virgin birth and dying and there's never anything that they write. You would think the Son of God would leave everything here, say, hey, here, look, here's something written for you guys. If you guys follow this, you guys might be better off. Instead, they just had teachers, disciples, or disciples are the ones who are just followers of them while they're alive, and the apostles are ones who are visited by the spirits of the Christ figures, whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, anyone could be an apostle. I could be I'm the 115th, whatever, apostle of Jesus Christ. It's like, oh, it's like, who could say that I'm not? Because I could clearly be lying. No one would know. So it's just kind of that thing is you take that stance. No one else knows, so I can make up anything as long as I make up something that people will believe. Well, I got my own little church, cult, whatever religion. People pay me, but see, that's not where we want to be because that's where we're at now, and that's what the problem is. So,
Yeah.
just trying to keep going back and back. I mean, even within history, there are these accounts.
It's interesting. I've been looking into like a lot. I've been doing some Bible research, pretty recently myself as well, and I've discovered some things that I feel like are interesting. The words are very interesting to me, because the words of the Bible are like words are programming, right?
Mhm.
And so like when you look at the Bible, it's like you're like your program, like and it's all good stuff that it says, right? Like the New Testament is all good shit, So like if you're really believing in that and you believe it and you read the words, then it's really powerful, So that has like a serious impact on your spiritual self,
Yeah,
just sort of something you're thinking about.
they probably had. I mean, they probably had to take some stuff. I mean, when I look at it, some of the teachings resonates really good to me too. But it has to be something people like and will follow. Otherwise, if they teach something that's just kind of blatantly not very like obvious, I guess. If you think about it, it's like that doesn't make any sense. Then most people are just gonna be like, oh, man, that's just whatever. But that's why there's so much stuff, because we also see a lot of contradictory stuff, which is confusing too. But anyways, so what stuff for you resonates while we're talking about this part?
What Pythagoras and stuff?
No, the stuff that you've been researching lately.
I've just been thinking about the saints and like there's some prayers and stuff in there that have been interesting to me as well. And I don't know, nothing too crazy for me. I'm thinking about like where my head's at is like, are we ready for another coming of Christ, right? Because we're pretty much coined up for it, right? The world needs another savior, so it's time for Christ to rise up, right, and lead the world to a better place, type of thing, right? So it's like that's how I feel. So I'm looking around like, when is it? It could be soon, right? Because it happened already. People say that Christ, my opinion and my friend's opinion is that Christ, it says in the Bible, like basically there's 4 accounts of Jesus rising up, right? There's 4 accounts, but that's not to say that there wasn't 4 occasions that he actually rose up and was killed, because the fourth time has different words in it. It says that's when Christ actually denies God, right? It was the 4th time. But not the other 3 times. So they could be actually completely different accounts of just all the same thing happening with the same names, basically, more or less, right? Like it could happen 4 times. So this is basically this second coming, this true like second coming is like it's like the second coming where he's actually successful, right? Where he actually like doesn't get murdered when he comes back this time, right? So like that's what we're waiting for, And so this time, whenever it happens, I look around, dude. I see all the signs. I see the signs for an Armageddon. I don't know if you do or not. Like, not necessarily saying it's today or tomorrow, but like it's approaching. There's some weird shit going on. Did you hear about Elon Musk and the brain chip thing? You hear about that stuff?
I may have seen some snippet, but I didn't focus on it. What's that about?
You should check it out. It's pretty crazy. I'm trying to remember the name of the company, but I'll see if I can remember it. But it's like you can look up Elon Musk brain chip. Neuralink. It's called Neuralink.
Okay.
But they're gonna put these chips. These like, even to this day, I'm like, I don't even know how many chips. They're like pretty sizable chips. I swear there's like 3 in one side of the brain and like in one side of your head and 3 in the other or something. But there's like hella electrodes. They have a fat robot. Elon Musk came out about 3 months ago,
Okay.
3 or 4 months ago, and he came out with a panel and a whole panel of doctors, neurosurgeons, and like scientists and all of the head people, and he had a full thing on it. He's like, we already have a robot built, and we should have it in patients by the end of next year. That's their goal, right? It's Elon Musk. He's kind of being like, you never know if it's going to work or not or whatever, and that kind of thing. But to know that he's working on it is pretty sketchy. It's pretty crazy. You should check it out. Go to Neuralink.com and check it out. There's a video. Watch the first few minutes of it or whatever, and skip around until you see the drawings and shit. Like, it's pretty wild what they're doing. But
it'd be interesting to see where that pans out. I mean,
but I don't mean to take you off topic. I'm taking you way off topic. I just wanted to make a cameo. I'm probably gonna bounce. I'm gonna have a cigarette.
Okay.
But But I just want to pop in, dude. I might do it from time to time. It's nice to say hello and see a friendly face.
Yep, it is. Also, are you going to start doing more videos? Because, I mean, I haven't seen much.
I haven't done hardly anything at all, just busy life, that type of thing. But I'll make more videos. I'm starting to settle back in. I just got back from a 10-day camping trip up in Fort Bragg. It was pretty crazy. That was pretty fun. I have a whole other story that's something I went through for a few weeks. I had a hardcore spiritual / real world journey, recently. That was crazy, dude. The stories I have are ridiculous, and unbelievable stuff, that type of thing. But as I get more time in my life, I'll be putting up some more videos and stuff, tell people what I think about things.
You should share those things too. Those are important as well. I mean,
yeah.
Otherwise, we're just confused. So, where did you get this information or this insight type of thing?
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, I look forward to actually I should do some more longer videos, put them out there.
Yeah,
I haven't put enough. So yeah, thanks for the encouragement, Yvonne. It's really you're quite the gentleman.
I hope
quite
so.
The encourager. You're a life coach over here.
I don't know about that. I mean, I got 6 people watching now. I have a hard time breaking 100 views.
Dude, you're hella famous, dude. I always see on there, oh shit, dude, Yvonne's back on it again.
Which I don't know how. Which is it's just funny, because I don't get a lot of views and subscribers. It's when I went fishing at Walden Pond and I made those fishing videos, people knew who I was. It's
yeah.
It's I thought nobody watched those videos. Apparently, a lot more people than I realized watched those videos.
Those were your big hits, dude. The fishing videos. So funny.
You're a fishing guy. It's oh yeah, I talk about all these things. I'm just a fishing guy.
All right, I'm famous.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right. Thanks for stopping in and come back often.
Yeah, I will, dude. I'll try to pop back by more just like this, make little cameos and stick around. We'll see what's up. But it's nice to say hi, dude. And I'll try to pop back around.
All right, cool. All right. Are you taking it off?
Thing off? Yeah, I'm probably gonna bounce. I'll probably leave your thing out and listen to you blabber away. But other than that, probably gonna pop.
So end meeting on the bottom right. If I kick you off, you're not able to get back in. So I'd rather not kick people. So
that's all good. You have a good night, Yvonne.
All right, you too. See you, Brian.
And new meeting. Enter.
All right, there he goes. All right. I'll continue on. It's almost finished, at least this part. And again, I just like people to look. I like people to search, even if it's within the New Testament or the Old Testament or whatever biblical scripture you've got. Search for it, look for it. Because if you don't, and you just settle on that, you're comfortable with what you figured out, or you think you figure out, or you just know it, but then you don't have anyone who's looked into other things just come in and just scrutinize what your findings are, then, well, how sure are you that what you found out is pretty much the truth and correct and whatnot? So, you gotta leave that up. That's kind of why I like being able to have people come in. It's hey, the stuff that I have found and I'm showing, and it's prove to me the opposite. Usually the opposite, of course, is always with some form of control system, right? Then I'm against the control systems, and so that's going to always be an interesting one. Okay, so let's keep going on Pythagoras. Here we go. It's quite ironic that Dr. R.C. Sproul, who rushes to defend the Copernican universe despite its opposition to the very word he claims to uphold, understands that the father of spherical earth, by his own account of things, taught knowledge, reason, and enlightenment as having come from man, not God, just as the serpent promised. For Pythagoras, knowledge begins and ends with man. All human knowledge is limited to our perceptions. And again, I think Pythagoras, of course, is the sophist that we kind of learned about yesterday in the dialogues by Plato. Knowledge begins and ends with man. All human knowledge is limited to our perceptions, and perceptions differ from person to person. Yep, he's the sophist, all right. When the Greek philosophers spoke such words as knowledge begins and ends with man, all human knowledge is limited to our perceptions, only which differ from person to person. He was essentially just summing up what those hieroglyphs of Egypt and Kabbalistic numerology and worldwide interconnected mystery schools proclaim. God is all, he is in everything. More importantly, we are God, or as his father Apollo, the serpent of the wilderness, promised, you will be like a god. Cultist reasoning drenches the bone of almost all establishment thinking. The Copernicans and the Newtonians must come to Pythagoras' aid. Any pastor who covets the praise of men will allow himself not with God's testimony concerning creation, but with all great scholars found favor with establishment thinking throughout civilized history, from Pythagoras onward. What happens when you pull a leg from the table, and Pythagoras is most certainly a leg, why the whole table falls. Einstein came to his beckoning call. One might even say Einstein was his greatest student. More precisely, Pythagoras was Einstein's first masterpiece, and I am told his most accessible one. From a young age, the great mathematician referred to Pythagoras as the Holy Geometry Booklet. But Pythagoras was a humbug of spherical earth, and so too was Einstein, despite his genius, a humbug. That was just another one that I saw. Now we're going to go here. Again, like I was saying, Pythagoras didn't write much about himself, so you have to garner basically what you know about Pythagoras from other works, usually contemporaries of the pre-Socratics, or maybe even Socrates, which is all recorded, or at least said to be recorded by Plato. So you're gonna find one contemporary who's pretty much adamant and against Pythagoras. And who is this fella? This fella is Heraclitus. And you can see a lot of bad things, ad hominems about Heraclitus. But man, I don't care about that, because man, aren't a lot of ad hominems thrown our way when we're looking into the truth? Yes, we get a lot of that thrown at us. All right, so this is academia.edu, Leonid Zmud, Heraclitus on Pythagoras. By the time of Heraclitus, and this is going to be a long one, and again, I can always go on the diatribes afterwards, and it's been about an hour, whew, and I'm getting exhausted from talking. All right, by the time of Heraclitus, criticism of one's predecessors and contemporaries had long been an established literary tradition. It had been successfully practiced since Hesiod by many poets and prose writers. No one, however, practiced criticism in the form of persistent and methodical attacks on both previous and current intellectual traditions as effectively as Heraclitus. Oh, dang it. My hotkeys are crazy. You guys, stick to my mouse. Sorry. Indeed, his biting criticism was a part of his philosophical method, and on an even deeper level of his self-appraisal and self-understanding, since he alone pretended to know the correct way to understand the underlying reality. This might actually be against Heraclitus, this author. That's not too surprising, as it's from academia.edu, but let's keep reading. He pretended to know the correct way to understand the underlying reality, unattainable even for the wisest men of Greece. Of all the celebrities figuring in Heraclitus' fragments, only Bias, one of the 7 sages, is mentioned approvingly, while another sage, Thales, is the only one mentioned neutrally as an astronomer. All the others named by Heraclitus, which is to say the 3 most famous poets, Homer, Hesiod, and Archilochus, the philosophical poet Xenophanes, and Pythagoras, widely known for his manifold wisdom, and finally the historian and geographer Heraclitus are given their share of opprobrium. Pythagoras, widely known for his manifold wisdom. So far we go, no. Manifold, I don't know what you would call manifold shakiness. It's not even a term. Anyways, despite all the intensity of Heraclitus' attacks on these famous individuals, one cannot say that there's much personal in them. He was not engaged in ordinary polemics with his contemporaries, as for example Xenophanes, Simonides, or Pindar were. Xenophanes and Heraclitus, who were alive when his book was written, appear only once in his fragments, and even then only in the company of 2 more famous people, Hesiod and Pythagoras. His fundamental complaints were directed against illustrious men of the distant and recent past, and in those cases where the grounds for those complaints are formulated or at least reconstructible, they are of a predominantly philosophical, or to be more precise, epistemological character. Heraclitus tries to assure his readers that he knows the truth which the others only pretend to know. From such a point of view, it is quite natural that his main targets were Homer and Hesiod, known as the teachers of Greece. Both poets are mentioned 3 times, though Homer, once in a seemingly neutral yet unclear context, he is simply called an astronomer. And Fragment DK B129 an epistemological charge can be very clearly identified. Men are mistaken as regards the knowledge of the visible things in the same way as Homer, who is wiser than all the Greeks. In spite of being the wisest of the Greeks, Homer still lacks the insight needed to apprehend reality, for he was not even able to solve a riddle posed to him by children. Thus, his wisdom is only seeming. Criticism of the same kind is directed against Hesiod in Fragment DK B129. Now, what we need to understand is there's another big critic against Homer, and that is Plato. And you're not going to see a lot of criticism against Homer from pretty much anywhere else except for Heraclitus and Plato. I don't know if Plato mentioned whether Socrates criticized Homer as well, but I mean, Plato attacks Homer quite a lot. And it's not surprising Heraclitus, because you can say Heraclitus is very like, if Heraclitus was around after Socrates, I would say that Heraclitus probably wouldn't have criticized Socrates, and he would have challenged Plato, but I don't think he would have criticized Plato. It's just too bad we won't we won't know if that what would have occurred. But anyways, that's just what I'm kind of trying to help illustrate, is just what are the types of people that Heraclitus is criticizing, and who else criticizes these individuals? Well, Plato is one of them. That's just as far as Homer. And then again, as far as Plato and his criticism of Pythagoras, I really don't know that I've found anything like that. I may have to go over it. And again, the biggest critic, if that's even a term, critic, that's the right term, of Pythagoras is Heraclitus. Okay, here we go. Indeed, Hesiod was unaware of Heraclitus' doctrine on the unity of the opposing powers, so his pretensions to be a master of truth are shallow. There's also a similar fragment on lucky and unlucky days, which is interesting. Guess who has lucky and unlucky days? The Mayans and the Egyptians. And I think mostly the Egyptians have most of them. That's interesting. Though in this case, it's not clear whether Hesiod was in fact mentioned by Heraclitus. If he was, this does not add anything substantial to his portrait by Heraclitus. If he was not, this reduces his presence from 3 to 2 fragments. In the last case, it turns out the main object of Heraclitus' attacks with Pythagoras, for he appears in 3 fragments, one with the other polymaths, and twice as the sole object of criticism. The force and variety of Heraclitus' attacks on Pythagoras demonstrates that he possibly saw him as being his chief rival in pretensions to wisdom. Since Pythagoras lived in Croton in southern Italy and did not leave any writing behind his fame by the time of his death. Look, one thing I like about reading opposing articles, whether they're in favor of Heraclitus or Pythagoras, if they both state the same thing, like, look, this person who's pretty much in a way defending Pythagoras as the wisest and Heraclitus as someone who has pretensions, he still states that, that Pythagoras didn't leave, Pythagoras wrote nothing, right? So we can both glean that, hey, in whatever source that we're looking at, Pythagoras didn't write anything. So it's always good to look at opposing viewpoints and what's written about them, because they're also looking. So at least that's a good thing. We know far less about his activities than about Hesiod, Xenophanes, and Acacius. Heraclitus probably knew more about Pythagoras. But in order to understand him, we need to compare his words with what we know about Pythagoras, and this is quite problematic. And the reason why is Pythagoras and Heraclitus, they were contemporaries in a way. I mean, I would say when Pythagoras was still alive, Heraclitus was still alive. So, or at least can see the works of Pythagoras and the aftermath of his death. A lot of people really aren't sure exactly where Heraclitus fits in the timeline. So, anyways, let's keep going. And the reason for that is because there's no fragments found talking about other contemporaries. We would think that if he was around after Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, he might have said something about them, but there is no mention, so we have to put him as before them, type of thing. Okay. The wide variety of interpretations produced in the last century arises not so much from the constantly challenging views on Heraclitus as from the changing views on Pythagoras. One of the trends is to replace an old image of Pythagoras, the philosopher and scientist, with a purely religious figure whose reflection must be found in Heraclitus' text. Another difficulty is that our three fragments contain an unusual concentration of words, which are either coined by Heraclitus himself, such as, and possibly, those are in ancient Greek, or appear for the first time in his book, such as I don't know. All this widens the spectrum of possible interpretations, which luckily does not make it endlessly extendable. Let me start with the shortest of these fragments, DK 22 B81, in which Heraclitus calls Pythagoras. This is rendered either as chief of swindlers or as originator, ancestor of swindles, because the genitive plural can be regarded as derived either from this or that. This denoted a speaker who could sway an audience with artful but deceitful words, which is pretty much a sophist, right? So Euripides calls Odysseus something. In the Byzantine dictionaries, something is explained as blah, 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 blah. If Blatt refers to such people, then Heraclitus would have in mind both Pythagoras as an arch cheater and the Pythagoreans who also deceive people with their mendacious species, the teacher of lies. This is possible, although a reference to Pythagoras coupled with the Pythagoreans would be unique in the 5th century. Besides, there is no evidence that the Pythagoreans were renowned as powerful speakers, although Pythagoras certainly was. On the other hand, the word this, and the plural of that, a kind of knife, refers not to lies themselves, but to deceitful speeches. This is how I think both sources of fragment DK 22 B81 understood this thing. Philodemus in the Rhetoric, quoting Heraclitus, calls rhetoric and not Pythagoras either the originator of swindles or chief of swindlers. Timaeus of Tyroneum, defending Pythagoras, again, pretty much everyone defends Pythagoras, makes the first variant more plausible, for he says, thus it appears that Pythagoras was the inventor of real swindles, but his accuser Heraclitus was the liar. Hellenistic, and again, in order to defend, they have to attack ad hominem against the person who's criticizing. And first, we look at the criticism. What is he criticizing about? Oh, okay. Is that criticism valid, or should we just, because he's attacking someone, we'll just attack him, and thus therefore everyone will just focus on the person. Hey, that guy's attacking that other guy. The other guy's cool, so this guy's got to be a liar. So let's not even look into what the criticisms are. Where have we all seen this before? Right. We've all seen it before. All this imparts more plausibility of the interpretation shared by H. Diels and other scholars, which makes Pythagoras the sole target of Heraclitus, originator, ancestor of swindles. Markovich's objection that there were liars long before Pythagoras, Homer, and Hesiod does not seem conclusive. First, Heraclitus does not call the poets liars. Secondly, swindles most probably refers to the speeches of Pythagoras, who addressed his audience directly. The tradition of Pythagoras' speeches having been given to various groups of the Crotoniates is attested by the Socratic Antisthenes and then by Diarchus and Timaeus in his comment on the Homer epithet. The wise and eloquent Odysseus Antisthenes uses blah blah blah. Anyways, there's so much here. But I don't want to go on too much of it. And again, you could basically, as much as you can find out about Pythagoras, And then you look up into Heraclitus and what Heraclitus was talking about. And then why would there be reasons to Heraclitus to criticize Pythagoras? And so we can pretty much understand that if we look at both of the figures and see what they are about, and all the ones influenced by them and where they've gone on, and like their students, and what's been brought, what the works, you will know them by their works type of thing, you know. So what we've got, in a sense, let's talk about numbers. Let's say like numbers in a way can show us kind of a glimpse of how nature works, and that's a good thing. But then to put things in these numbers as not mere coincidence, but saying it's a synchronicity, it's, hey, it fits, so therefore we are right and we are on the path to, this is what God is. And they'll say, hey, come here, 10% of your earnings, not $10, 10% of your yearly earnings. I'll tell you everything you need to know about God. For example, when you look at these things as, what speed of light, right? We get something like that. And this is where a lot of conspiracy theories kind of go. The longitude pyramid of Giza, right? You got the same number, right? Speed of light is 299,792,458. You got, and you got the longitude of the pyramid of Giza, 299,792. I mean, it's exact. And people go, oh, that's so weird that the Egyptians knew the speed of light type of thing. Well, first off, who created the coordinates of longitude and latitude? Someone. It didn't just pre-exist. It wasn't in nature. Same thing with the pyramids. They didn't have longitude and latitude when they built it. Now, speed of light, they didn't have the measurement of what speed of light was, and what is the how is speed of light measured? Is a vacuum exactly as that per meters per second, and so that's kind of how they're doing it. And then again, it's only coincidental if it's meters per second. And who created the meter? When was the meter the standard? And where did the meters come from? Well, what you're going to get is the meter is all this, but basically, where did they originate the meter? And what you're going to find is maybe here, Wikipedia. Let's see. From the French unit meter, from the Greek noun measure, length of the path traveled by light in a vacuum as that of it per second. But you can't have the meter to measure the speed of light in a vacuum in meters per second unless you have the meter first. And you can't get the meter by using the speed of light in a vacuum. And of course, you're circle jerking again. But then you realize, okay, so the meteor was originally defined in 1793 as 1/10 millionth of the distance from the equator to the North Pole along a great circle, so that said distance would amount to simply 10,000 kilometers and ease global navigational computation. Now, which North Pole? Magnetic North Pole? Or is it the geographic North Pole? What have you? And how did they measure it? Did they have some really long tape, or it's just all mathematical, right? And along with that is the North Pole. When was the North Pole explored? Who discovered the North Pole? It's definitely not in 1793. If you go ahead and Google it, because Google is your master of telling you your answers, right? Who first discovered, explored the North Pole? It's gonna be in the 1900s by Robert Peary, 1909. So it claimed to have reached the North Pole, but what? In 1793, they measured the distance from the equator to the North Pole. I mean, they weren't at the North Pole. They would have credited someone else aside from Robert Peary as the conquest of the North Pole. They would have had it in sometime in probably in 1700s, probably like 1780 or something. Saying, hey, 1780, we conquered the North Pole. Why don't we measure from the North Pole to the equator, and we could use that as a measure of distance called meter. It's not the case. So what we have here are people coming up with numbers, saying these numbers that appear as magical, and stuff. It's just all made up by people. Although the stuff, whether it's proportions and things like that, well, that is in nature, and you don't have to apply a number to it. But if you do, it's not going to be exact. But for the stuff that you find, people go, "Hey, numerology, this is cool. Look, if you get some proportion to this proportion, you get exactly this proportion to that, and therefore the distance from the Earth, sun to the moon, and sun to the Earth, and Earth to the sun." The Earth to the moon, all of that. That's all been figured out a long time ago, back when the start of Freemasonry, and whatever start of Freemasonry. All right, like they figured it out way back in, say, 1646, or if whatever it is. That's when the authorities will tell you when Freemasonry started. And all of this is found by the mile. But then when you go into the mile, like when was the mile standardized? Well, it wasn't standardized until 1959. Sorry, July 1st, 1959. And the thing is, it keeps going back and back. I mean, the Romans had a mile. They all had their own mile. There's a whole bunch of different miles that were used. I mean, not quite, but then if you apply it to the same numerology to these different mile standards that weren't standardized in 1959, basically whatever was used was probably the English mile. It's not going to come up with the same kind of numerological end feet. So basically, they had to know beforehand that the mile that's being used today is the one that was going to be brought about and written about decades, if not centuries. So, I mean, I don't think they can plan centuries in advance. So, it's basically a bunch of circle jerk and stuff. So basically, they're saying, hey, look, we figured out all these numbers. All these numbers are miraculous because it can't just be coincidental, which, of course, they made them coincidental, and thus come to my religion. Be my student. I'll show you how to become this or that or whatever. So we've got the origination of using using some sort of numbers and mathematics and geometry and stuff like that to say, hey, look, this is a miracle. And we knew about this miracle, and we've been teaching it for years and years and years. Yet they're the ones that probably made it up so that, hey, let's standardize it as this. That way we can say, look, this is a miracle. If you want to find, if like there's the normal people, mass people who don't ever look into the esoteric or the occult, and they're the ones, whatever, we could say anything. They'll believe that story. So I'll let them have it. But then there are going to be people who are like, I don't believe this story. So how do we get them to follow us and get control? Well, we'll give them something more. Look, you guys know that all of the stuff, you guys kind of see past that. But you know what? I've got a secret for you. In the back lot, it's where we keep all the special cars. you know, the customized ones, the stuff that's just only had one owner, one driver, or they've never really been driven before, but you know, we keep them in the back lot for special people like you. Right? They have to really talk these people in. They go, okay. And then you guys get, you know, but the thing is, you don't have access to them yet. I mean, I know you probably have money, but you have to do these things. You know, we can't just give them to ordinary people. We have to give them to good people. And you know what? We're going to give you a discount too. So again, a lot of talking, a lot of getting people into all these things, and they just want you to keep going to the control systems. Believe these guys. Believe these rhetoricians. Believe these sophists. Believe these people who everything is made up. Whatever, you know. Follow some other person, not your own intellect or your own findings or things like that. And that's kind of where we are now, right? Oh, yeah. Ever since there was an update to Windows 10, it messed up the drivers for my microphone. So let me take my sound off. And sometimes if I disable it and enable it, it works. So give me a second. Is that better? How's it going? Port from Co-op, Dave Wong. We need critical thinking. And look, I can get it when people don't agree with me. But then when you don't agree with me, but you're just sprouting the same things that I've just kind of I've already explored. I've already shown you. It's already been contradicted. Excuse me. And it's no longer even shown. It's a lot of theatrics. It's the man behind the curtain. All the distractions over there. Once we see behind the curtain, what happens? Oh, I'm exposed. Let's send you back to where you came from, right? You know, I can't control you. You've already seen behind the curtain. Let's send you back home. So that's how it goes. They just want you out of there. They don't really care if you're. They're not going to try very hard to control you anymore. They just know, hey, you're uncontrolled. We're not going to be able to leash you back up, and if we do, we're probably going to get more hurt for it. So whatever. I mean, there's only a certain amount of trouble that they're going to go through to keep you going back into the herd. You know, it's just like the cowboys and the cows during a storm. You know, some cowboys will try to save every cow they can. You know, and sometimes it's like, you know what? I'd rather save the majority of these cows than just some of the ones where we know we can't save, or if we do, we don't know if more will die or if any of the cowboys will die. Therefore, cut our losses, keep going, double down. And you know what? We still got all these other people behind us, all these other cows back here that are just going to follow us, you know, so, you know, cut our losses type of thing. But the thing is, the ones who are no longer part of that herd, what do we do, right? If we want to keep going, we got to find our own herd, lead ourselves. It's like, hey, this is great. We're free and open. First off, let's prevent the cowboys from putting us back into the herd. Second is like, what do we do from here? It's like, well, we can explore wherever we want. We don't have to be herded. We can walk where we want to walk, type of thing. So all these analogies are nice and good. Let's see. And what I like, no globe earthers come and talk to me. And there's a good reason for it, I think. I mean, all I have to do is just contradict what they say. And the thing is, everything that's said in the globe earth narrative has always been contradicted. That's why we're here. If there was no contradictions, we got nothing to stand on. I mean, I can ask a globe earther, someone who really, really believes globe earth. And the first thing I'm going to ask him is, when do we start seeing the curve of Earth? At which height? Which altitude? um, well, they're gonna say, well, we could see it at ground, at level, at, you know, wherever we're standing. Or they'll say, oh well, airplanes. I've been on airplanes. That's where the curve starts. Or you're gonna say, oh, you know, the guy who jumped off the balloon, the Red Bull guy. You know, he was like twice the height of a no, 3 times the height of a plane. We saw the Earth, the curvature of it there. And then you talk about, okay, so who's the most renowned theoretical physicist of today? Bar none, everyone's going to say Neil deGrasse Tyson. Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson says, well, you can't see the curvature of the Earth from that height. So, again, when do you start seeing the curvature of the Earth? And there's only one instance where some government is going to have a document that's saying this is when we start seeing the curvature, or we can see the curvature of the Earth at 60,000 feet, and that's because they have special like scientific aircraft. And the pilot goes, "Oh, you can see the curvature of the Earth." Well, that's even before that Red Bull jumper guy, Baumgartner. So, as someone who believes the Earth is a sphere and you can see the curvature of the Earth, when do you start seeing the curvature of the Earth at what altitude? And you've got the leading theoretical physicists that all the scientists in the establishment look up to and want people to look up to, and saying, well, no, you can't see it 120,000 feet in the air in that altitude. Or you're going to believe, I guess, some pilot in NASA saying, oh, you can see it half that height, the curvature of the Earth. And why doesn't NASA basically specify when you actually start seeing the curvature of the Earth, where you can see it on camera or on a non-wide angle lens, etc.? They should know. They're the ones who go up into space all the time, right? But they don't give you an exact figure. So why don't you have that exact figure? I mean, we have all these exact figures. We have all these exact historical dates. We have all these exactness within chemistry and physics and heck, even astronomy and all of that stuff. All of that is very, very, very exact in many ways. But you know, they're not going to give you exact details of when you can start seeing the curvature of the Earth. That seems like that should be something that's really important, isn't it, for someone, for being, you know, if you want to find out the globe is the Earth is a globe, that should be simple. But then again, it's never meant to be simple. It's supposed to be, you're just supposed to believe it, because the ones who originated the entire rhetoric and actually sophistry of the globe Earth origination, it's all started with Pythagoras and the sophists. He was the sophist because he pretty much did what sophists did. He used relativism. He used rhetoric, and he used recompense. I mean, he was paid for it. He was there to persuade people, not to convince people. And he had some absurd stuff that he talked about, backed up by nothing. Basically, if you were in his school, you had to do what he did or you're kicked out of school. And if he revealed anything from his school, you were pretty much killed for it. So, you know, what do we see there? We see the same thing in mystery schools. We see the same thing in our military. We see the same thing in pretty much anything where you're not supposed to be a whistleblower. You whistleblow about stuff that's not right, not the right thing, things that are wrong. You're basically enemy of the state. So that's kind of it. That's where we're going at. And so tomorrow, hopefully I can break it all down into something a little bit more easier to grasp. You know, maybe I'll have like some graph or something, pictures in a graph. People just, if I talk about it, if I just have people say, hey, you got to read it yourself. I get these deer in the headlights look, and No, Bonnie should just explain it to us. I mean, I'm trying to. I feel like I should have already. And you don't have to look much into the ancient Greeks. You just have to know very simply. Let's break it down to some number that's very easy. Let's just look into two groups. We don't even have to make it into three groups. Just make it two groups. You've got the people who look for the truth, the philosophers, and you got the philosophers who are just saying they are the wise people. They don't need to love the truth, look for the truth. They have the truth right there, and all they need to do is just bring people to believe them. The truth becomes what you believe rather than what actually is. And so the originator, if you put the originator of globe Earth in which camp, which one is it? Is it the people looking for the truth, or person saying, "Hey, I got the truth"? Come to me, I'll tell you. It's gonna cost you a little bit, or a lot. 5 years of silence. Whew. But anyways, there we go. We put them into two little things, left and right, right and wrong, black or white. Pretty simple to do. And then you look at the people who've been on the side of the truth, and who are these popular figures who were influenced by those, and you got the other side, basically everyone else. Everyone else, because that's where we're at today, and the majority of everyone else are the sophists. And you got very, very few people throughout history always looking for the truth, trying to find it. And we've found it, and we're going to keep finding more. We're going to find each other, and you know what? Try to get everyone else on board, because this ship is taking off one way or another. And get ready for a fun voyage to something... something. Right? Okay, so that's it. It's been a long hour and a half. Feels like a long time because I'm talking a lot, and I hate talking. I'd rather just be quiet and play video games or read. What should I do? Read, play video games. I'll figure that out. Or take a nap. I haven't slept early. I'm always looking into stuff. That's why the Matrix. See, even my Zoom account went deactivated because I've been idle for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me, and I will see y'all at the end of the night, and hopefully it will be tomorrow night. See y'all.